What's the biggest challenge you faced while working on the project?
Yeah, there were a couple of them, and I think one of the first ones we hit was actually getting the data to show. We had a great idea for a product, but wasn't going to amount to anything if we didn't have the specific course data and evaluation data to show. And figuring out how to get that off the Yale site was a lot trickier than we thought it would be. So we had to actually go in and scrape the data from the screen, do screen scraping on the current OCI or the old OCI, and figure out how to load it into our database. But it was a lot of trial and error, and eventually we got it working. And once we got past that point, it was much smoother sailing. And I guess one of the other big things we dealt with was we were using a lot of new technologies to us. We kind of knew of them and knew they fit the project really well, but we hadn't used them before. So it was definitely a learning process for us as well, which is part of what made it so interesting to work on, was the fact that day to day we were learning how to use these libraries in new ways. And so I think initially we didn't use them to their full potential, but since then we've learned pretty intimately how to use them. Jared actually fixed some of them and sent the changes back. So it's been really cool to experience new technology and figure out how we can use it to make better websites that people use.
And Jared, on the front end, like what challenges were you running up against?
So I think, as Charlie alluded to earlier, when we started building Bluebook and I started designing it, we were going only based on the feedback of essentially ourselves and the 5 or 10 really close friends who we were able to share the project with. And so from that, we had a vision of what we thought it should look like. But it was really, the challenge was was essentially stepping back and saying, okay, this is what I think it should be, but let's actually talk to our users and figure out what they're actually going to use. And so it's really been an iterative process. We've been able to say, okay, we're going to put this out there. Our users are going to respond to us and tell us, no, this really doesn't work, or this is almost there, but I'd like it tweaked just this way. And we can evaluate each of those requests and figure out if that makes sense in the context of what we see the overall product trying to be. And so the real challenge has been to take all of that feedback and figure out what's relevant, what's not, and put it together into something that still feels cohesive and still delivers the best user experience possible.
So guys, talking about the startup community at Yale, it seems to me that 4 years ago, there wasn't as large a community of people who were either willing or able to make something like Bluebook. What do you think has changed in the last 4 years, and what has been your experience working within this growing community of people?
So I think you're absolutely right. 4 years ago, when I came to Yale, it was not like it is today. There was certainly a few groups on campus that did technology entrepreneurship, but it was not a big presence. And I think what's changed that is two things. Fundamentally, there's been a big shift externally as a big force kind of in the national community of tech entrepreneurship growing as a career path that is not only a really well-paid one, but one that can also be really exciting. And there's now also a huge flush of venture capital funding available. And that's been driven in part by Facebook and Twitter and the likes, and in part, I think, when the economic recession hit, a lot of people were laid off, and they said, well, I can learn how to code, and then I can go build on whatever my ideas were. And that's led to a lot of really cool startups out there. So I think that's been a big external force that's kind of made its way into the Yale community, and people are recognizing that that's a potentially viable career path for themselves once they graduate. So I think when that has kind of gotten into Yale, and it's inspired a lot of students here, whether they be computer science majors or biology majors or English majors or what have you, to say, well, I've had this idea, and now I think I can figure out a way to find people to build it with me and put it out there. And so I think there's lots of people who have been building small things, whether they be little fun apps or things for the Yale community, like our friend Bay Gross, who's done is it Chicken Tenders Day, and things of that ilk. And then there's also people I know who have tried to actually set out building full businesses. And so it really runs the gamut, but I think it's an externally driven force that's now gotten the Yale community excited, and now everybody's kind of feeding on each other's buzz.
Yeah, and I think kind of like Jared alluded to, one of the major things that's changed is the technology available to us. It's kind of in two senses, Amazon and the cloud computing, right? That really has made it easy. It has lowered the barrier to entry a lot, because what used to happen is you would have to rent a virtual server. It was a couple $100 a month. Now you can go on there and get an EC2 server for like $60 a year or something, and just play with it. And that's instantly out there on the web, and you can do anything you want with it. In addition, I think the prevalence of language, kind of how languages have evolved. Ruby on Rails, just as a language, is extremely easy to get started in. You used to have to do like .NET and ASP programming and Java, which are really hard to. There's a huge barrier to entry, and so I think making the languages easier to use. Like even JavaScript, you used to have to write your own cross-browser compatibility stuff. The libraries out there that'll help you with that now are incredible. And it means that basically anyone on campus, if they have an idea, can take a stab at making something cool of it. And I guess one of the things at Yale specifically that's very cool is Hack Yale over the past year, 2 years now, I guess, has given people, I think I taught myself to program, but I think a lot of people want to learn how. They just feel like they need someone there to help them. You need a point of reference. You don't want to just pick up a book and learn. You want to have some interaction, ask people, what am I doing right, what am I doing wrong? I think Hack Yale's lent some structure to that in teaching people HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the foundations. And that's enabled a lot of people to do cool things. For instance, I know Jared actually teaches one of the classes this year, and one of their assignments I heard about was to create a simple page layout, or I think you gave them a picture, right, a layout to mimic. And then I got this email the week after from Bay, who's another one of the instructors, and he goes, take a look at this. And it was someone who it looked almost exactly like the layout. It was a 3-column layout, but it was for the Yale Film Society. And it's really cool to see the direct impact that's having. Someone in that class created that website that would have otherwise been, the 6-year-old website they were using before or whatnot. Created that from the knowledge they gained through Hack Yale, and I think that's really important. In terms of going forward, I think that ITS and Yale has to step in at some point.
The administration.
Yeah, they don't provide classes right now because it's too practical, right? Yale's all about the theoretical. But providing that practical education is what enables people to actually go out and use those skills and say, I'm going to make a website. I know how the net connects and how in theory it works, but to actually do it, you have to learn that. And so I think that would be helpful from the administration side. Maybe that means supporting Hack Yale. I think the new innovation center they're building should be really cool, and ideally a gathering place for people who want to work on stuff like that. I think the YCC App Challenge has been huge. It went from, I don't know, there were like 5 or 6 teams last year. There's 12 this year, I think, something in there.
So finalists,
yeah. So it's become huge, and that just goes to show the number of people who are really excited to make a difference on campus. The barrier that still remains, though, is going back to what I said was our hardest part, right, is getting the data. Yale has to have APIs available. Harvard does a much better job of this. But Yale has to have those APIs available, and what that allows students to do is to take the data and say, this is how I think it should be used, right? That's at its core what Bluebook is we're taking the same data. We didn't invent new data, but we're saying this is how it should be used. And I think that would go a long ways in making very cool apps available on campus.